Thank you. Yemen is, I think, the perfect case of turning tragedy into a victory not only for Yemen or the Yemeni people, but for all mankind. And I will explain why. For 3.5 years, as our friends have discussed, the Saudi war on Yemen, backed by Britain, the United States, and France, and other countries, has brought with it many tragedies, but also many ironies. It showed that the apparently weak do not necessarily have to lose in the face of the mighty. Yemenis, while admittedly being the poorest people in the region, have a deep sense of historical identity and a culture that goes back thousands of years into history. They are a proud people with a republican sense of freedom and a rough landscape they have that is very advantageous in defensive warfare. All these factors made them capable of resisting the Saudi coalition, backed by some of the most powerful military forces on the planet for more than 3 years. But that was at a very, very high price, as we have seen. Another irony is that right in the middle of the worst war and humanitarian crisis, some Yemenis, and for the duration of the war, have been studying economics as defined by Lyndon LaRouche and the Schiller Institute in order to figure out how to build a modern economy and avoid the disasters of the past. They also have been studying the new Silk Road and want Yemen to join the Belt and Road Initiative and the BRICS. As I said in my opening remarks earlier, to survive tragedy, you have to look towards the stars, i.e. at the future, and derive inspiration and courage from them to survive the current fight and also pave the way to solving the crisis. Earlier this month, on June 6th, a seminar was held in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, right under the ongoing escalation of the war. Can I have the first image? It was held at the headquarters of the Yemeni General Investment Authority, where the Sana'a declarations were issued. I have to explain for you just, the man standing to the left is Fouad al-Ghaffari. He is now the head of the preparatory committee of the new Silk Road Party in Yemen, and he also is organizing young people to form what he calls a BRICS youth government. And he has been leading the initiative in Yemen to introduce LaRouche's economics, and at least one school in Yemen now are preparing to teach LaRouche economics in their schools. Unfortunately, he was unable for the third time to attend this conference because the Sana'a airport is completely blocked. The Saudis and the coalition does not allow anybody to fly in and out except for the UN envoy. And there's no other way to get out of Yemen. He deserves all our respect and encouragement, because this is really a act of courage and defiance in the face of the most horrible war being launched on their country, because they say, we are not give up in the face of this. We will develop our intellectual powers to defeat the enemy, even, mentally, so because we have a future to fight for. We are not fighting just to survive, we are fighting to have a future. So in that seminar, where the declaration, Sana'a Declaration, adopted an 80-page Schiller Institute report. It's called Operation Felix, Yemen's Reconstruction and Connection to the New Silk Road. I am the main author of the report. The GIA Deputy Director, who was in the picture sitting to the right, Engineer Khaled Sharafuddin, opened the seminar by thanking Helga LaRouche, Chairman of the Schiller Institute, for her and her organization's relentless support to the Yemeni people. He expressed his full support to the proposals made in the report and stressed that the Yemeni General Investment Agency will work on 2 tracks with the government in Sana'a. One is to translate this report into an action plan for the government, and the other track is to thoroughly study all the infrastructure and financial proposals made in the report in order to launch the reconstruction process as soon as the war of aggression is stopped. Now, the GIA, the Investment Authority, and they helped in this by providing us with all the documents we have needed to study the Yemeni economy and also where the strong and the points of strength and weaknesses. So that was very crucial in making this report. And the other person who helped in this also to identify the general frame of the report, the structure, is my friend and the long friend of the Schiller Institute, Mr. Gregor Alberg from Sweden, an architect. Now the report is in Arabic. I wrote it in Arabic, but if you are lucky, you will get the latest issue of EIR, where we have a 10-page review of the whole reconstruction plan. Now, one of the key chapters in my report is on how Yemen's economy was destroyed even before the war was launched in March 2015, through 30 years of wrong economic policies, mostly under the guidance of the IMF and the World Bank. These policies resulted in Yemen getting the nickname, the poorest country in the Middle East. You know, every time you hear the news, Yemen, they say the poorest country in the Middle East. That was the result of these IMF and World Bank policies. The reason I took special care about what happened to the economy and people of Yemen before the war is to warn the policymakers against the pitfalls of the economic and financial methods that have been dominant in the transatlantic old paradigm and its clients or victims. It's necessary to know these things because there's a risk that the same economic methods will come back, disguised this time as reconstruction aid. It means that the same enemy will come back from the back door to present to you economic policies will destroy your economy exactly as the war destroyed your economy. One phenomenon which I describe in this report is called the reason for the collapse of the Yemeni economy is something which is called the rentier state, which described, and this is the fault of the Yemeni government itself, it's not the fault of the foreigners. It describes a state that rely mostly on or solely on the export of their easily extracted abundant natural resources in order to import all their needs, with little attention paid to investments in improving domestic productive capabilities or educating the population or building infrastructure. Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, and other OPEC nations generally are good examples of this, and Iran, of course. But Yemen is an extreme example of this. I'll show you just the next image, just that you don't get confused. In 1987, Yemen discovered oil. And in 1986, they discovered oil. American company Hunt Oil discovered the first oil. And then there was a massive increase in the production of crude oil. And although the prices at the time were around $40 per barrel, they were a huge source of income for a poor country. Now, before oil, in Yemen, in 1961, there was a Republican military coup. There were Republican forces who overthrew the former imam, a religious, semi-monarchist. And the imam was a Zaidi. And this is an irony because the British and the Saudis helped and armed the Zaidis, the imam, against the Republicans, whom they are now fighting in. So before that, after 1961, the Yemeni government under the Ibrahim al-Hamdi had 5-year development plans, which were similar to Egypt. They were Nasserites. They were supported by Egypt. And they had a very clear intention to develop the economy by building infrastructure, reforming agriculture, and so on. But that was ended in 1978 when al-Hamdi was assassinated in collaboration with Saudi Arabia. So what happened in Yemen is that you had, just the one before, is that you had a sharp increase in oil income, and the oil prices were also going up in a certain period. So the government abandoned all the development policies and started just selling oil and importing everything. There was no infrastructure built, but suddenly, both the oil prices, and there were 2 oil shocks after the Asian crisis, 97, the oil price collapsed, and in 2007, 2008 also because of the financial crisis, the oil price collapsed. So the government was left with no resources. So then they called on the IMF and the World Bank. But Yemen's own consumption has increased, the population was growing, and that made Yemen a complete hostage to the oil prices and became a net importer, actually, of oil products in 2014. So that was the fault of the Yemeni government. In 1995, the IMF and the World Bank came to help Yemen solve its financial problems. There were 4 rounds of so-called 5-year structural adjustment programs, and I refer to these in my document. These structural adjustment programs forced the state to privatize its corporations, lifting state subsidies for food and basic commodities, firing tens of thousands of state employees, opening the domestic market for competing foreign goods through radical free market policies that killed whatever existed of the domestic production. And it's needless to say that these programs, they forbade the state from investing in infrastructure or in industries or in massive agricultural development. So, and even in spite of the dire food situation in the country, especially after the global food price crisis in 2008, Yemen was encouraged to increase the exports of cash-generating crops, such as fruits and vegetables, with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries being the main market. With no support, no protection for the domestic cereals productions or grains, farmers moved to cash-generating crops, fruits and vegetables, but more seriously into the khat drug, which witnessed an explosion in that period because of the economic and social crises. I mean, the result of all these policies, this is what people call the poorest country in the region. And you can see that between 1990 and 2014, all the general indexes of social and economic well-being of society have been collapsing or stagnating. So I'm not going to go through every one of them, but the situation just continued to deteriorate. And food imports were, Yemen imported 80% of all its grain before the war. So it is no wonder that as soon as the Saudi coalition blocked the ports, the famine was a fact. Also, the deficit in food production was increasing. The only thing which was the deficit was reduced was in the fisheries, because Yemen was encouraged to develop its fisheries, but it was export directed. And also, this is a very fascinating picture. This is agricultural area in Yemen between 1961 and 2015. Now, just to go back to this, the IMF policy, but the reason we are saying this is because this was experienced in most countries in Africa and South America and many Asian countries who were subjected to the. But this is a fascinating picture that agricultural area in Yemen did not increase from 1961 to 2015. And the Yemen permanent crops did not increase either. And now this is the cereals production. Actually, it decreased with the level it was in 1961. So anyway, we go directly to the how to reverse this policy. I could say, as our friend said, that the Republic of Yemen enjoys a unique geographical position at the intersection point of the land-based economic belt of the new Silk Road and the maritime Silk Road of the 21st century, the red and the yellow. Thus becoming a key component of this giant development project and benefiting from it at the same time. Yemen played a similar role in the ancient history when it had mastered the routes of trade, which were called the incense and the gum routes. And many powerful nations from east and west were setting sail and camel caravans in its direction, seeking trade and exchange of knowledge. The reason I call it Operation Felix is that the ancient Greeks and later the Romans called Yemen Arabia Felix, means happy Arabia, because it was known to be a prosperous and happy nation. Today, Yemen enjoys great human resources. You can have the next. This is the the chart of population growth. It's quite phenomenal. Between 1965, from 5 million to, in 2005, it was 24 million. Now it's 27 million, as our friends see. So this is a very sharp increase in the population. But the interesting thing is that the age pyramid, which is the lowest is the youngest of the population, and then you have the age ascending there. As you see in the population pyramid, it shows that the median age of Yemen today is 19.2 years. That's the average age of the Yemenis. That was in 2015. And it is projected to be 29 years by 2050. Now, in comparison, I looked yesterday at Germany's median age, and it's 46 years. The average German is 46 years. And maybe some people should have to reconsider the refugee crisis or change the cultural and economic policies to solve it. By 2045, Germany will have a median age of 50 if they are lucky. Yemen has also abundant natural resources and a diverse climate that makes it suitable for integrated agro-industrial development. What is lacking in Yemen, though, like in many parts of Africa, is what Lyndon LaRouche calls the economic platform, the platform of basic infrastructure to lift all these resources to higher levels of productivity and to bring into being their potential. Now, I'm not going to go through the details because we propose that the president of Yemen goes on TV, this is what I say in the report, and declare that Yemen has a national reconstruction plan based on these, but also it has to announce that Yemen will establish a national credit facility, a national reconstruction and development bank, which could issue sovereign credit with the backing of other nations like China. But Yemen has to become completely independent and sovereign, have its sovereign currency to issue the credit necessary for doing the work that could be done within Yemen. I'm not going to go through that because it's too much details. You can read it in and we don't have enough time. But also the additional source of financing for the reconstruction process and the development projects, especially ones requiring foreign technology, machinery, and involvement of foreign companies, is through export credits with the nations whose corporations participate in or export necessary materials and technology for the development projects. One very good example, which we include in the report, is from Yemen itself. In 2013, China and Yemen made an agreement to finance the Aden container terminal expansion projects, to expand the Aden port, especially the container terminal. The project, which was planned to be carried out by a Chinese company, costing $500 million, US dollars, was to be financed through a loan extended by the China Export-Import Bank to the Yemeni government. So China would finance the project, Chinese companies will build the project, and then they will deliver it to the Yemeni Ports Authority. So the Chinese will not own the facility, and Yemen will run the port and pay back the loan to China over a very long period. However, the project was not carried out due to the deterioration of the security and political situation in 2014. The project was intended to make the Aden container terminal one of the largest ports in the western part of the Indian Ocean. The agreement was signed in November 2013, 1 month after President Xi Jinping launched the concept of the maritime Silk Road of the 21st century, which would make Aden and the other Yemeni ports a key component of the maritime Silk Road. So the key component in the development plan proposed in this report is the construction of the Yemeni Development Corridor, or corridors, modeled on LaRouche's concept of the development corridor. Now, when you look at our maps of the Silk Road or the World Land Bridge, you see all these lines crossing the continents. These are not just a railway or a camel caravan carrying goods from the east to the west. These are, the concept is to build what we call, or LaRouche calls, the development corridor, which is 100 to 150 kilometer wide. This is a cross-section of it, which includes railways, roads, water canals, oil and gas pipelines, power lines, nuclear-powered new cities and agro-industrial centers. So this should be this is the concept that will stretch from the east to the west, opening new areas with potential development, but they need these tools to be able to raise the potential which exists in their countries. The report conceptualizes the Yemeni development corridors with the main spine extending from Sada to Aden. This is the main, we call it the spine or the backbone. And then you have the limbs going to the port cities, but also to the plateau, which is has a great potential for development, but also along the coast, which will benefit from the maritime Silk Road. So there were three factors were considered in defining the routes of this corridor. First, the current distribution of the population density. Most of the Yemeni population live in the Yemeni plateau, which in the mountain areas. So this is in the first stage. This would be important to serve the community there. And then we have also the agricultural activities happen to be also in the same fall in the same corridor. These are the existing the existing resources. And then even the rainfall map shows the concentration of rainfall and water resources in the same region. And then we have the mineral resources of Yemen. These are the industrial mineral resources, which also fall in the same line with the proposed corridors. Now, we start from the existing resources, then we expand into through the economic platform to open new areas of Yemen for development and demographic expansion, because you cannot have the population concentrated only where you have these previously existing resources. So as we say, so we need to have an expansion, the demographic and economic activity to the coast areas with the Hodeidah port, the Mocha port, and also into this plateau, especially with agricultural activity, because most of the agriculture in the highlands is concentrated on fruits and vegetables. It's a very tough area to grow grains, for example. So therefore now there are plans actually already to move the grain production into these areas and to these areas, but you need to develop the water resources to make it possible. And then the third concentration is that Yemen should be connected to the Belt and Road, Initiative. It will be connected to the Belt and Road, to the land part of the Belt and Road through projects connecting to Oman and across the Hormuz Strait to Iran and further to Central Asia, but also to Russia. And also there is a proposal for a bridge or a tunnel across the Bab el-Mandeb Strait to connect to Djibouti, Ethiopia, and the rest of Africa. Now, in the future, of course, if there will be peace, this does not exclude the fact that Yemen is connected to the rest of West Asia with Saudi Arabia, with the Gulf countries, and so on and so forth to Europe. But at the moment, the perspective for doing that immediately is not there. But it's very important that in the future that the Yemenis and the Saudis are reconciled. Now, many tribes on the border between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, I mean, their nationality is not really identified. They are Saudis or Yemenis. Nobody knows if they are Saudis or Yemenis. Therefore, the borders of Yemen with Saudi Arabia have not been really demarcated. So the people in Saudi Arabia and Yemen, they share, you know, even in a tribal sense, they share a common destiny. So anyway, I mean, we refer in the report to the tremendous developments that are taking place in Africa, thanks to the Belt and Road Initiative. But also this means that Yemen could benefit massively by being a transport and logistics hub, but also considering East Africa as a major market for developed Yemeni products. Now, we also, in order to give people an idea, the policymakers in Yemen, an idea about the cost, the difficulties, the technical aspects which they will face in building these infrastructure projects, we took one example from Ethiopia. This is the Mekele Weldeya Awash Railway. It's being constructed now, partially by Austrian, Turkish companies, but also by Chinese companies. It's 2 sections. And this is a topographical map of the Horn of Africa and Yemen. And this shows that, you know, the greener you go, it's the lower, close to the sea level, and the brighter is the higher altitude. So this railway, it goes from 800 meters above sea level to 2,800 meters above sea level. So there are enormous difficulties, and I describe in detail how many tunnels. There are 30 tunnels built, 60 bridges, culverts, all kinds of things. It's strikingly very close, both demographically, but also the topography is very close to the Sada Adan project. And therefore, we are trying to give an approximation already now for people to consider the cost, the difficulties, and how it is being constructed, and also to draw inspiration from these projects, that these things are possible to do. Anyway, in conclusion, I would just like to say that in the June 6th seminar in Sana'a, which I described earlier, I proposed that the government there adopts this plan as a key component in any peace and reconciliation talks between the different Yemeni belligerent parties, and that this would be agreed upon before, that this would be the mission of the future Yemeni government, that everybody agrees that this is what we want to do when we have peace. Not to have peace, as I say in the report, we don't want to reconstruct Yemen to what it was before the war. Because before the war, as we remember, Yemen was the poorest country in the region. So it's not our intention to bring Yemen back to what it was. We want to transform Yemen into the future. In the same time, thank you. In the same time, it's a means of motivating the international community to consider the absurdity of the continuation of this war, and the fact that the people controlling the government in Sana'a are not mere militias with power ambitions, but are statesmen with visions and knowledge. The responsibility to stop this genocidal war is upon every individual and every government in the world today. The vision for launching a genuine reconstruction and development plan in Yemen is in harmony with the new paradigm of cooperation in the world as expressed in this conference so far. Thank you very much.